How's it going, guys? It's Gamalio, and I'm here with
Pete,
and
Dhanraj.
and these are the workshop presenters for the morning Ragas Desi Day workshop. First question I've got for you is, what drew you to the sitar?
I was originally a cellist. I grew up playing in a really sort of international music environment, as well as playing in sort of school orchestras and stuff like that. And then when I got to music college, I was expecting to meet more kind of like people that were sort of had these connections to musical knowledge from all over the world, and sort of connections with people from outside of that kind of Eurocentric thing, and I didn't get that. And then someone came to do a sort of a 6 week introduction to Indian classical music, and I was just like, this music speaks to me like no other music. It's so beautiful, it's so melodically complex, and as well, there's this very, very sort of thin, tangible connection between my own sort of family's heritage, because they were originally Romani before becoming like circus a traveling circus family. That it kind of also anchored me into something that was like really old and distant, because it's kind of like where my ancestors like 1,000 years ago kind of started off. And so then when I met my the teacher that I have now, who's a sarod player called Ustad Muhammad Khan, when I met him in 2019 after about 10 years of kind of learning the basics, we found loads of similarities between his family history and mine through being essentially hereditary performers that have been passed down through our families. And so I've got a lot of like strong emotional and musical kind of connections that make this be this is the music that I think in now. It's the same way as like
So interesting.
when someone moves to another country and speaks another language, they start to think and dream in
In
that
that language,
language.
yeah.
And so for me, that's kind of ragas is the musical language that I learned to sort of feel in emotionally and musically now.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That was a great explanation. And your instrument, please, before I butcher it, what is your instrument called?
So the instrument that I play is called the tabla.
Tabla.
Yeah, perfect.
Oh, wow.
So
this.
what drew me to that instrument? So what I would say is that because I am of Indian heritage, but my upbringing is not traditional in the sense that both of my parents are both descendants of Indian origin. In other words, they're part of the Indian diaspora. So my dad is of Caribbean origin, so from Guyana, obviously of Indian heritage, and my mum's from Mauritius, also of Indian heritage. So there wasn't so much of an awareness in within the diaspora culture of Indian classical music per se, but there was an understanding of the fact that this music existed and it would manifest in different ways. So the devotional music tradition is very strong, and that's something that's carried over the hundreds of years that my ancestors have since migrated from India to other parts of the world. And so because I was at such a young age, I can't really pinpoint exact things about the tabla in particular that I was attracted to, let's say. But I think overall, just the fascination about the sound that it was able to produce within that context is what drew me in. Eventually, I started learning formally from my guru, who goes by the name of Rajkumar Misraji. So he's a tabla maestro, I would say, from the region of India known as Calcutta. And I think when I started learning with him, it just stuck out to me the sheer depth of melody that's present in these drums. And I think it's not controversial to say that if you compare tabla to any other percussion instrument from around the world, there's a very distinct sound that the tabla is able to produce. And I think with that melodic range that it has, inevitably you're able to emote a lot more than you would be able to when it comes to other instruments. And so I would say now that my fascination is more about exploring the nuances of that sheer sound depth that the instrument has. It's one thing to learn the technique, but the subtleties are now what fascinate me more about tabla.
Oh, wow. That's perfectly said. I really resonated with that because I grew up playing the instrument, guitar and drums, but traditional guitar and drum kit, But to hear about how the instrument itself gives you that openness to explore more, to divulge more into it. I don't know. It's a beautiful thing to me,
Yeah.
because that's the whole thing about music. It's about trying to become one with the music, not just playing an instrument. You're actually learning how to express through it. And I feel like that's your full understanding of the instrument itself is what shows or shines through when you're doing your workshop. So I really appreciated that today.
Thank you.
So what encouraged you to bring this workshop to Bristol? Do you have any ties to Bristol?
So I do. I live in Peel. I've been in Bristol since 2020, and the being a sitar player here, I wanted to make something that's grassroots, because there are Hindustani music concerts that come. They're often in St George's, which is a wonderful venue. It's really, really beautiful to experience, but it's also not so easy to access if you haven't come across it before. People are maybe if they're not sure about what this sounds like, or what are familiar with it, they maybe would be more reluctant to part with 15-20 quid to go and see something, whereas these concerts are much more it's part of a concert series I'm organizing called Bristol Betex, and they're kind of like informal concerts that introduce people to this music, so it kind of enriches the knowledge of the audience, which kind of builds familiarity, which then means that maybe next time they would then come and see the one at the big concert hall, because there's that sort of connection there, but you've got to build that audience.
It's like kirtan. I heard there was a very small kirtan community in Bristol, but over time it's just exploded and become bigger and bigger, but that's because the knowledge about it and the reach is just exponential.
Musical practice. People often think that when you're playing music, you're just making sounds. I say that's not correct. When you're playing music, you're sharing knowledge. You're sharing knowledge because it's not just about the sounds you hear. It's about the way you move. It's about the way you connect socially with people. It's about the spaces you inhabit. It's about the way that the histories in your body, the histories in what you're playing, the way they all kind of tangle up together and make something new. So if you're doing something even that's very old, some of the music that we're playing is a couple of 100 years old, and sometimes even 1,000 years old. When you're playing that, you're making something new, because that old line is connecting and tying up and getting knotted with the lines that you've got, and then this new line is sort of weaving its way out,
kind of like a never-ending melodic circle. It just keeps improving and like growing on itself,
and wrapping around more people in more places, in more spaces. So this, in short, yes, it's in Bristol. However, you've come from London.
Yes.
I grew up in London.
Hey.
Yes.
And you growing up in London, did you feel like there was a space? Because compared to London, Bristol has a big niche community. Like you can find a small community for almost everything. And I feel like London, though being a very big city, doesn't always have that like connectivity in the boroughs. You know what I mean? So do you feel like you had that creative expression in London, or do you feel like you had to move somewhat to the outskirts to be able to have a space or community to share this with?
So I think in London there are a lot of positives. There are also a lot of negatives as well. Because Indian classical music in and of itself is such a niche subject, everyone who's involved within that field kind of knows one another. And predominantly a lot of it is centered around London, because that's where so many of the musicians are located. But what you say about the interconnectedness between the different areas, that I would say is correctly, as you had pointed out, somewhat lacking, because I feel like we have lots of groups in different areas of London, but it's rare that there's ever a collaborative effort to kind of work together. What's amazing about Bristol Betex, in my opinion, is that not only is it giving people a platform to perform, so perhaps underrepresented artists. So not only is it giving them a platform, but also it's about educating audiences. Because I find that people will only come again and again if it's something that they can feel a part of, but also have an understanding of.
Yes,
and so the more and more the audiences feel a part of what we're trying to give to them, and the more they learn about the music, the more they'll be encouraged to seek out more of these sorts of performances. a lot of the time, I think when we look at these things through a commercial lens, which can be easy at times, people will gravitate towards what is the kind of loudest voice or biggest name within a particular industry. And so there are lots of organizations that have created that. But then what kind of falls between the cracks is all the other musicians that are perhaps not the big names, all the other representations of the art form that don't fit into what's now commonly presented as Indian classical music. And so that's why I feel that the educational aspect, promoting underrepresented artists, and also making people feel welcome and being a part of this and learning about the art form holistically is very important.
Perfectly said. I couldn't ask you to put that in a better way, quite honestly. And my last question to keep you guys, before I keep you guys here any longer, is what misconceptions do you believe or had about this type of music that you would like to clear up? And what do you believe would be the best impact you can have bringing this music to the world?
Well, the big one is everyone thinks this music, that everything that happens that's got a sitar and tabla in it is 4,000 years old. And, you know, there is a history that goes back that amount of time. But actually, this music is contemporary. It's evolved and developed stylistically along a very, very similar timeline to the way you know, musical traditions that people in Europe and America are more sort of familiar with, you know, like Western classical music and stuff. Like the timelines of development are almost identical. You know, there was a kind of, you know, a big period of change around the medieval time, and another big period of change in the sort of 15th and 16th century, and then another big period of change in the 18th and 19th century, and then another big change in the 20th and 21st century.
It's always been changing and morphing.
It's always been changing and morphing and growing and changing as new people have been coming in and sort of bringing their influence. You know, this is a cosmopolitan practice. It's got a history that spans through the Islamic world, going back to sort of through Afghanistan and through into Persia. It's got knowledge that's sort of you know, rooted in India itself, with its like sort of like core Sanskrit kind of foundations. It's got bits of Greek Pythagorean theory in there because, well, you know, it was like the only reason that we've got like Greek knowledge is because of the fact that it was translated in Iraq in the 9th century, and so that knowledge it went into Europe one way and it came into the north of India the other way. So it's like that feeds in. You know, it's got so much. It's like it's almost got more international origins, this music, than Western classical music does. You know, and so like I think starting to think about it less in an essentialized way of it just being, you know, sort of representing like this kind of ever othered kind of 4,000-year-old sort of spiritual thing. It is that, but it's also so much more.
Yeah, I think one of the common misconceptions that I find, especially with this type of music, is that it often gets pigeonholed into being something that's heavily associated with meditation and psychedelics. And I think that's quite limiting in the number of moods and pathos that this music is able to convey. I would say that anyone who has any kind of interest in any sort of music would find something that appeals to them within what we present. You know, if you like say if you like drum and bass, like a lot of the stuff that we do tabla wise can almost echo a lot of that. If you like really slow and developed melody structures, then there's a lot of that in the alap portion of like sitar. And then it goes through the full range of emotions and the full range of speeds as well. So I think the misconception kind of comes around the fact that it's always very slow, relaxing, but it's so much more than just that.
Thank you guys so much for finding the time to speak to me today. I hope my questions were able to give you a space to give people more knowledge about something you care so much about, because it shows through your performance. So thank you so much. And I hope you guys have an amazing day.
You as well.
Really appreciate it. Thank
you
you so
Thank
much.
you. All the best, man.
All right, guys.
Sorry.
Thank you. No, it's all good. Oh my gosh. That was pretty good.